everyone, and welcome to this new conversation of excellence. My name is Stella BIDA, and I am excited for the next minutes that we will be spending together. We have a special guest for this great conversation, Miss Gugu Dembele. She is the executive director of the Oprah Winfrey Leadership Academy for Girls, and she's much, much more than that. And I am happy that we're going to discover together the human being behind. Gugu, welcome to the Conversations of Excellence.
Thank you very much, Stella. I'm so honored to have this conversation. I even like the topic of conversations of excellence because I think there's a space for them in our world now. So thank you for inviting me. We're happy to be here.
Awesome. I'm excited for the next minutes we will be spending together. And actually, as we are starting, I was wondering, what do you want us to know about you before we start, as we're starting this conversation together?
Well, I want you to know that as much as I'm the head of the Oprah Winfrey Leadership Academy for Girls, I'm also a mother.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a human being. I'm a teacher. And so I'm an ordinary person, but most of all, I'm a mother.
Most of all, you're a mother. I love that. Now, I'm wondering, as you're saying that, as a mother, what are the values that you thrive in communicating to your family and your children?
You know, in my culture, Stella, when you are a mother to your biological children, but you're also a mother to a lot of other people. And so even that mothering, I'm extending it beyond my children. So the values that I extend to my children and to all of you who are my children are the values of integrity. That's the first one. I think how you turn up is as important as how you end up being. The second one is humanity, Ubuntu in South African language. In our language, we say you are because I am. And I always instill that in my children, that they must always be humble. They must always be kind to other people, regardless of which station they're at. And I always want my children to be, the greatest gift you can give your children is to allow them to be who they are, to be able to express themselves the way that they would like to express themselves, because that time is limited. The time of being a child is limited. Childhood is limited. And so we need to make sure that the experiences of children and young people are as fulfilled as they can, and they explore as much as they can before the world impacts on them.
That's beautiful. I love the way you value you value the childhood moment, actually.
Yes.
And it's the way I feel it is that sometimes childhood is like a moment which does not really matter, but the way you bring it up, it's like that moment of life does matter, and it's a great space for exploration.
Absolutely. And childhood, your experiences in childhood, Stella, most often determine how you're going to be in life. You know, and if it's a negative experience, a lot of your life is spent mitigating that negativity. When I worked at Save the Children, my big issue was to protect the childhood of children so that they experience the beauty of just being, and in a world that protects them, in a world that allows them to express themselves, in a world that has, of course, frames, or you create a framework for them, but allow the children to be, because it is through that exploration that they become whoever they're going to be in the past. So if it's negative and there are no mitigating things later in life, then you see children either they're taking drugs or they become criminals, and you wonder why that has happened. But you haven't looked back at their childhood to see how that experience has been for them.
Mm. It's very deep what you're talking about on the importance of childhood. And it actually brings me to a question regarding your new show,
Right.
which is sipping tea with Thishomkhulu. And I hope I did say it well.
I'm so proud of you. You did. It's
Oh,
perfect.
I'm so happy. And the depth of what you talked about on childhood brings me back to, I remember when I discovered your new show, I still see myself on Facebook, and there was this banner with you. So beautiful. And there was a quote underneath which said that deep conversations with the right people are priceless, if I remember well. And it like, I felt a little bit of electricity in myself, like, this is beautiful. And I wondered, why did you choose that quote and not another one to materialize your show?
Let me give you context, and I'll be very brief. I was raised by a domestic mother who worked for whose mother was a domestic worker.
Mm.
And in South Africa at that time, and you're from Africa, you know the context. And every Thursday, domestic workers with their uniforms sit outside their bosses' houses, and they have tea.
Mm-hmm.
And it used to fascinate me that with all the exploitation that they have from their madams and bosses, they still found the time to sit and have tea and share their experiences and have dreams for their children, so that their children have a better life than they have. And it has always struck me that in the middle of all of that, these women in that time, they would sit and have tea and talk about what matters to them. And so over time, I realized, Stella, that everyone's story matters. When they were sitting in that corner, it didn't matter to them that they were domestic workers. But the things that they shared probably shaped who I was as a young person and who I grew up to be.
Yeah.
So I'm shaped by that conversation of a domestic worker sitting in the corner with other domestic workers having tea. And then I thought that sometimes we think that great conversations are with well-known people or with, and that's important because they don't get well-known by chance. They go through stuff. But conversations are also with ordinary people. And it's in the stories of those ordinary people that sometimes you find greatness. So that's the idea. That's why I chose that thing, that it doesn't matter your station in life, your story matters. And your story has got lessons for leadership, lessons that I would want to have as I grow in my path of being a leader, but also that I would want to impact on my girls here at school and girls worldwide. So that was the idea.
Oh, it's beautiful. On Thursdays. Wow. It the way you shaped the way you described the importance of these conversations on shaping who we become gets me actually curious to know, what do you think is the most important thing about yourself today that got shaped through these conversations?
Mm. I've always, I used to introduce myself, Stella, when I go to events. I would say I'm a short, black, South African woman, and I have a chip on my shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to explain to people why I say that. It's because the message I'm sending is that I come with, in any context, I come with baggage. We short people, we always think, we've got issues. They always say short people have got short tempers. But I'm
I'm
also
short
glad.
too, by the way. So I
But
can.
I'm also glad in South Africa where racism is what I went through. I'm an African in a continent that is has got poverty, where we are not recognized as human being, and I'm a woman, and women are not treated as well as they should here in South Africa, in the world. So when I came into conversations, I came with that please understand that, Stella, sometimes when I come at you, it might not be because of anything other than the fact that I bring all of those biases. And my thing was that I need to recognize that I bring biases. And so sometimes I miss the realness in what Stella is saying because I'm already on edge. Is she saying that because I'm Black? Is she saying that because I'm a woman? Is she saying that because I'm short? Instead of hearing the question, instead of hearing the conversation. So these conversations have helped me to also shed that baggage. They've helped me to get into conversations as pure as I can and accept that conversations have got nothing to do with me. I need to do my own healing, but I must also accept Stella as being who she is. So I'm learning to shed my baggage. I'm learning to own my story, and I'm learning to give people a chance and understand that it's not about me all the time. The question that I might not like is not about me, it's about the question. So I'm learning, and it's through those conversations that I'm learning that.
It's very interesting what you're bringing up. And it leads me to think about the identity that we bring up as ourselves into society. And I don't know for you, but sometimes the way I felt it is like I had to make a distinction between the way others defined me and the way how can I aspired to be defined, even though I was not there yet. And it leads me to the question, especially when you talk about the baggage that you bring into a conversation. Have you ever had to, during your journey, kind of redefine who you are in order, I don't know if it's the right word, but I would say in order to fit in society?
Yes. And it's in two ways, Stella, and thank you for both the context in which you asked that question, because I think it is about us having an aspiration of how we want to be defined and how we are defined and how we define ourselves at that point in time. I've always been big. When I grew up being that girl who is fat, who is, so I've always been bullied because I was not a typical, beautiful, cute little thing. I've always been fat. And you grow up in a context where size matters. The standard of beauty is how small you are. So I've always had that question. So I've spent a lot of my life. There's no diet that I haven't done. Just to aspire to look like what I think society wants me to look like. Until I reached a point that actually I'm bigger than my weight. I'm better than my weight. I'm actually smart. And so I bring the smart, and through that I learned to define confidence from an inner perspective, not from an outer perspective. And so I can lose the weight anytime I want to. But what I have in me that no one can have is how sharp I am and how intelligent I think I am and how beautiful I think I am. And then I started to determine my own sense of identity in the way that I want society to treat me. And so I brought that, and I realized other people don't matter. It doesn't matter. It's not a thing. But it has always been my thing because that has always been how I was defined. It's the same as being a woman. When you're a woman, you are a young woman. You're in a space which is amazing. You're doing incredibly amazing things. But for the longest time, and I think even now, those things are done by men. They matter if they're done by men. They're more profound if they're done by men. And so you learn to own being a woman and being a pathfinder. And then start saying, you know what, actually, and I don't have to have the attributes of men to be powerful. I don't have to be, I think our greatest strength as women is nurturing, is our nurturing um, background. We are natural. And so our strength lies in our nurturing. We're not aggressive people. But sometimes when you're a woman, you want to adopt those values because you think that's what makes men powerful. It makes them powerful, but it doesn't make a woman who wants to act like a man powerful. And so I've had to redefine those things over time and shed some of the things that I think were taking away from my identity and my own authenticity.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Gugu. I love the way you brought a piece of your story into answering that question. And as you were talking, I was actually, I really connected to what you said. So thank you very much for making it relatable. Um, it's quite interesting, and I was wondering in that redefinition of ourselves, sometimes we need to go to areas where it's deep and it's difficult conversations. I mean, when you said, I am fat, I am not typical, it's like you have to go there. You have to go where it's difficult. And it's like it's a important stepping stone to change or to arrive to where we want to go. And I was wondering, especially nowadays, I guess there's a lot to do regarding change in this world. And I consider that with your role through the academy with the girls, you are building these leaders of change of tomorrow, even of today, not tomorrow, of today. And concerning the difficult conversations, I was wondering for you, what are the most important skills, like more than ever? What are the skills which are important today for your girls, for example, to be these leaders of change who dare to go to the deep conversations and the difficult ones?
Yeah. I think the first thing, and I'm also learning it here at the academy, I've always believed in being authentic.
Can you repeat that, please? I didn't hear.
Sorry, being authentic.
Okay, great. Yes, yes.
And for me, being authentic means being comfortable in your flaws, being comfortable in your weaknesses, but also being perfect in your imperfections. Because I think sometimes we want, it's related to the point we discussed earlier. We want to be who we are not, and we don't realize that actually the power lies in who we are. The reason why people respect you is not who you are not, but it's who you are. So I always tell the girls all the time, own who you are, own your story, own your journey, because it has shaped you, but also own your flaws. I'm a lifelong learner. I'm the type of person, I'm like a sponge. They always call me a sponge here at school. I learn all the time because I don't think there's a pause in learning. And so the second value, I tell them, be open to learning all the time, even from people that you don't think are as important or are as great as you are. Be open to learn because you will always find something worth learning and even something worth unlearning. Because learning is not always learning the positive things. It's also learning the not so positive things that you need to also tweak and get out of your system. The third thing is that integrity. I've said this before. For me, integrity, how you turn up needs to be who you are. There is nothing important in leadership as more than integrity. People need to trust that what Gugu says is true. Because people look at you in your wholeness. The last thing is that you are worthy. And part of self-worth is understanding that I'm good as I am. And so part of working with the girls who come from disadvantaged communities, because that's the girls we work with, but who are incredibly smart. But they've allowed the narrative of being disadvantaged, the narrative of poor, to overwhelm how intelligent they are and how amazing they are as young leaders. And I say to them, listen to the voice that is positive. Listen to your strengths. You are here because you are a leader. You're not here because you're poor. Poverty is a circumstance. You know, it's not something that defines you. So you're here at the school because you are smart, because you are a leader with still leadership potential, and that's what we're working with. The other things you can work out. The other things are not your identity. And so that's what I ask them to bring. I ask them to bring their stories. We have a very good program on storytelling, because it's also a journey to healing for us and for them.
Wow. It's beautiful. It's really beautiful what you shared. And I love the fact that when you say we always tell the girls to own who they are, to own their stories, but also to know how to tell their stories. And the impact of that on the healing process, it's really beautiful. Even in the way, go ahead, please.
No, I was saying, one of the things that the founder of the school always, who's very interested, in fact, her idea of the school is actually this: it's a school that allows the girls to be the best that they can be whenever they turn up to be. But it's also about the school that allows the girls to grow. And so as a school, we are very conscious of the role of trauma in our lives and also in the lives of the girls. That as a society, certainly in South Africa, from where you come from where you are, is that we have trauma that we bring into situations, and that no effective learning or growing can happen if you don't attend to that trauma. And so as a school, we are a trauma-informed school. Our approach to learning and teaching and leadership has a trauma-informed lens in it, which means we try and work with the girls to recognize their trauma, go through it, plow through it. I always make an example, Stella, that I love gardening. And so sometimes I will sow something and it doesn't grow, and I learned to realize over time that it doesn't matter how good the seed is. If the ground and the soil is not ready, the seed will not grow. And so our approach is to work with the ground. So we need to make the ground fertile so that if we bring curriculum, the girls can learn. If we bring leadership skill, the girls can grow. So that's the example that I'm making. And part of doing that is asking questions differently. So if something happens, so if I work with someone who is very nasty to me or someone who bullies me, it's not to say to them what's wrong with you. The question is, what happened to you? And that's the difference. So that's the different lens, because once you understand what happened to someone, you view their actions differently rather than what is wrong with you. And it's a journey, it's a growth that we all go through as a school, but it's that learning thing that I'm saying I'm doing all the time to not say, what's wrong with you? Why are you so nasty? But it's really to understand what's wrong with you. What happened to you that made you to be so nasty?
Oh, thank you for bringing that up. It's very powerful what you're bringing up. And I am personally amazed by the safe space that you have, that you're nurturing and that you're creating through the academy for these girls to be able to go to such a question. What happened to you? When you said that, I was like, oh, it takes something to even embrace the question, stay in the space of the question and explore. You talked about exploration as well. I'm really amazed by that.
And it doesn't mean when you answer that question, you are minimizing the negative thing that a person is making. Whether you're talking about Hitler, whether it could be the most terrible person. The question is what happened to him. Not as an excuse, but as a way of trying to deal with the trauma, and to deal with understanding, and then placing that person in that corner of it's okay, it's who you are, it's how it's your own experiences, and it helps you to also grow in your own journey, because our journeys are not static. There's no you don't stop growing, you don't stop healing, and you don't get to a point where you say, I'm healed. It's in different pieces, and you go back sometimes. And so as a school, we are very conscious of changing the narrative of an African girl, changing the narrative of a South African girl, changing the narrative of a girl from the world to be that of a positive story. That when you tell your story as Stella, you acknowledge that you come from the Central Republic, but you know what? Actually, you're here. And your story is of this amazing young woman who is creating this platform for people to have these conversations and for other people to get neatness. Because I also went into you researched me, I researched you. And, I learned from the people that you've interviewed, I've learned from your own journey. So even creating that platform is your story. That's the story that you're writing. It's not the story of the torture and where you coming from. That so I admire that, and I want my girls, my children, to have that, to tell a different story when they meet you, not the story of abuse, not the story of poverty, not the story of hunger, but a story of how great they are as young girls.
It's beautiful, and thank you for sharing that. I'm touched. I'm really touched. So, um, when you were saying that, I felt I connected to your motto around leadership, which is leaders leading leaders. And I remember before we started the conversation together, I talked to you about why I actually started this,
Yes.
where I had another vision of leadership, which is powerful, but from that space of openness, vulnerability, sharing. And what you just did, I'm touched. What you just did, by talking about what my story, etc., building the platform, I felt, I really felt insecurity when you were speaking, and I was like, wow, this is a leader leading another leader and creating a space for conversations to happen. It's beautiful. Regarding that motto, leaders leading leaders, I was curious to know, why did you choose it to 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 drive you, or what is the role of that motto in your life? Why is it so important?
You shared your own story of your own journey of leadership and how it has been shaped over time. And I think the biggest weakness in our leadership narrative now is that we think they're leaders and they're followers. Um, and and I think part of that contributes to the egos, to the narcissism, to instead of saying, regardless of your station, regardless of who you are, you're a leader. Because if you can self-lead, you're a leader. You might not be a leader with a title in a defined space, but in a space where you are as an older girl, you're a leader, because turning up for school every day is self-leadership. Uh, Making sure that you do homework and assignments is self-leadership. choosing to engage in whatever activities that the school makes available, that's self-leadership. Choosing to grow and to create a positive path for yourself, that's self-leadership. You might not be the principal. You're not the principal. And so I believe in the space that I'm in, I'm leading leaders. And as leaders together, we are sharing, we are growing together. And if I take that as a mentality, it means I don't have a deficit approach to leadership. I have a much more affirming and growing approach, that I'm not dealing with empty vessels. I'm dealing with people who have this innate in them. And my role in their lives is to grow it, to make it better. Not to think that I'm creating leaders. I'm not creating leaders. I'm nurturing leaders. I'm growing leaders. I'm building in, because parents, your leadership capabilities start from wherever you come from. Parents have got an incredible role that they play in building leaders. They just don't call it leadership. When they discipline you at home, it's because they want you to be someone who is different, and they're building a leadership capability for you of someone who's disciplined. And so it's very important for us as leaders with titles to understand that we're not leading followers, we're leading other leaders. And that requires a different set of skills, that requires a different set of mentality. And so I grow from the girls as much as they grow from me. I have got wisdom, I've got years, but they've got the kind of creativity that I didn't have. They've got the kind of sharpness that I didn't have as a young person. And so it's a mutually growing experience. I'm learning from you now, and you're a young leader.
Wow, it's beautiful. Again, I love the way you even used your hands, like there's a synergy which is created between the environment, the girls, the people who are supporting them. It's like there's a two-sided each time exchange which is present there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm mindful of time, and I would stay here for hours, to be honest, personally. But I also know that we're heading towards the end. And one of the last questions I want to ask is, you've brought up so many times the importance of childhood, how it shapes us, the role of parents during the childhood. And I wanted to know if you had um, Gugulethu of 10 years old sitting just like next to you for tea, for example, what would you tell her?
You are enough. Gugu, you are enough. That's all I would tell her. Because I think that, in spite of the amazing, I was raised by an amazing mother. My mother was probably the most affirming person in my life. My mother instilled in me a notion that I can be anything that I want to be. There were never any spaces that she didn't think I would be great in. But like I was saying to you, but because I always had this image of myself, it was always a thing that blocked me. It was always a thing that, I'm not, when you have beautiful friends, or you have, friends who've got, who wear short skirts. I've always been that kind of girl. I didn't comb my hair. I didn't, and you waste so much time not accepting who you are. So even to my 15-year-old, I've got twins. I've got a girl and a boy. They're 15-year-old. I tell my daughter all the time, and my boy all the time, you're enough. You're okay. And it's okay. This is who you are. You are enough.
Hmm. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, and for bringing in your twin children.
Yes, I call them my munchkin.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Oh, we're really going towards the end. It's always a moment like, oh, time. So, last question. I really wanted to give you the floor to anything which you think is important and that we've not talked about, we haven't brought forward, anything that you think perhaps would help people to realize that um, they can all be these leaders who lead other leaders, for example, anything.
You know, I've always believed, um, Stella, that it's very important, firstly, for people who have these incredible platforms that we have, and incredible voice that we have, incredible spaces that we have, to look at those spaces as spaces of access for other people. Not to speak on their behalf, but to create those spaces for them to speak for themselves. Because at the best of times, we want to represent people, when in fact we could create those spaces for them to represent themselves. So that's the first thing. That's the challenge to people who've got these spaces. And the second thing that I want to say is, and which is why for me the thing of being enough is important, is that the world can throw so many things at you that draw you back. It is very important that we build people's self-worth. Because if that's not your starting point, if you don't have self-worth, it doesn't matter how many degrees you have. If you don't believe in yourself, you don't think you are worthy, nothing you acquire will be meaningful, because that inner thing that you have, that you've got that emptiness of worthiness. So as a school, our leadership model is really about building self-worthiness in the girls. It's about them understanding that they are enough. It's understanding that they are worthy. That's why for us, that label is not an important one. The important one is that, actually I've overcome, I'm actually better than a child who came from a privileged position, because they didn't have to fight anything. I had to fight poverty, I had to fight violence, I had to fight discrimination, and here I am. I'm at the Oprah Leadership Academy for Girls, and I am worthy. I'm not here because I'm lucky. All the girls are not here because they're lucky. They're here because they're worthy. They earned their spot in where they are. And so it's important for us as society, whether you're a mother, whether you're a father, whether you're a friend, instill, whether you're a caregiver, instill in a young person and help them to build self-worthiness, because I think that's the game changer.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up. It's like what you just shared is at the core of everything else. It's like it's like, how do we say that in English? The seed before the tree grows. What you brought up is so fundamental. So thank you very much for that.
And thank you, Stella, for not just for the conversation, but also for taking this step to opening these conversations. Because the more people talk about their experiences and about their way of doing things, the more we can all learn. And it's for me, it's always happening if it's a young person doing that, because as you're growing, you're also growing other people. So thank you and congratulations on the platform that you have. I think it's timely.
Thank you very much, Gugu. Thank you so much. And I have personally loved this experience, and I know the people who are listening are loving it too. And I just wanted, like, if people want to follow more about your new show, or just get to know about these conversations that you are also creating, is there any way we can follow you?
Yes, please. I mean, you can follow me on my all of my social media platforms. If you go Google NDEBELE, you'll find my social media platforms, but also on the OLED Facebook. We post all of our events on the OLED Facebook. And so if you like the page, you'll have access to the conversations and we'll put the links there. And I'll also use your own platforms to make sure that I also reach your own audience. But whether it's in my personal space or in my professional space, I speak about the same things because I don't think you take a break from being a leader. I think leadership is an everyday thing.
I love that sentence. We don't take a break from being a leader. Beautiful. That's a beautiful sentence. And this is it. It's the end. Thank you very much for being with us, Gugu. So beautiful conversation, such a beautiful one. Thank you for bringing your presence to it.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. And thank you for allowing me to share not just my story, but the story of the Oprah Winfrey Leadership Academy for Girls. Because I honestly think it's an incredible game changer for young women. And our vision is to make sure that people have access to what we do here, and we share the good, the bad, and the ugly, because we learn from every aspect. But that everyone gets an opportunity to enjoy the gift that Ms. Winfrey gave to Africa, not just to South Africa. So thank you so much for creating that platform.
Awesome. Thank you. Bye-bye.